Arceus. Often seen as the end-all be-all deity of Pokemon, it is almost unanimously labeled as the strongest in the series. And if you know anything about it, then it should be obvious why. Within the in-game mythology, Arceus is said to be the creator of the Pokemon universe as we know it, and is always depicted as all-powerful, having a 720 base stat total to show for it. And that's without any alternate forms or a Mega. True believers simply believe within the lore of the series. Arceus' strength is absolute. There are none that match its power. But as the series has progressed past its introduction in Gen 4, some fans have come to speculate if Arceus is as truly unstoppable as many believe. So, is Arceus truly the strongest Pokemon? Well, that's not as easy to answer as you would think. So today, let's try to see if we can find the best possible answers to this question of Arceus' true place in the franchise. In Sinnoh mythology, it is said that Arceus hatched from an egg when there was nothing, and shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms. And right away, you can kind of see why people have some questions about Arceus. How was there an egg when there was apparently nothing? 1,000 arms? I don't see 1,000 arms on Arceus. Of course, the game does not hide the label of mythology when it comes to Arceus. So perhaps we should take the language here with a grain of salt. Perhaps an egg is simply what us mere mortals are capable of interpreting as its origin, and therefore that is the term used within its mythology. The 1,000 arms could also be more figurative than literal, but we'll talk more about that detail a little later. When it comes to the actual power of Arceus, well, again, it's complicated. As far as gameplay goes, Arceus is incredible, and even broke aspects of the competitive meta for a while. Its moveset isn't much different from other Pokemon. Its signature move, Judgment, being learned at level 100, and is a fairly straightforward attack with 100 power. But one of the more fun things about Arceus are the type plates you can use to change its typing, and therefore change the typing of its Judgment attack, even altering its appearance. But if you're walking into this video, chances are you already know about all the plates and how they work. But nonetheless, the fact that it can change its typing so easily means it can just take on whatever it wants and potentially have the advantage over any Pokemon. So you look at all of this and think, yeah, how can Arceus not be the strongest? Well, one of the earliest instances of people believing that perhaps it's not entirely unstoppable was the Azure Flute event in Generation 4. You could battle and therefore defeat or even capture Arceus. It was a bit of a joke in the fandom that some kid could just go and catch God due to this. However, the event in the original Generation 4 games was never available to players by normal means, as the Azure Flute was never distributed. So at the time, it could be argued that since it was never distributed, the event never actually happens, and therefore it couldn't be considered canon that the player character could catch it since it was only given through the gift system. But with the remakes, you can now obtain the Azure Flute and catch the alpha Pokemon there. So we now have an example of it being properly catchable or defeatable in the core games. On top of that, this is only possible if you defeat Arceus in the post-game of Legends Arceus. So you already have to beat it once to get there. More on that game later. Of course, there's perhaps the interpretation that Arceus is letting itself be caught to observe what your trainer is all about, and that it's also not using its full power. Though all the same, some may see that as a cheap excuse for a gameplay element, as it can still clearly be made to faint in battle. But personally, I don't think it's unfair to say that at least something is holding it back somewhat, considering what we end up seeing it do. It also doesn't help that the ring on its back half is very similar to the bottom of the limiter helmet that Type Null wears, which was clearly intended to control its power, leading to many fan theories on how intentional this was and what it means in the case of Arceus. Let's change the approach for a brief moment and talk about the manga and the anime. Arceus very much has a larger-than-life presence in the Pokemon Adventures manga, but its feats are mostly what you would expect. He handles Gold's team with ease, and even makes some human characters vanish in a flash. I think from a strength point of view, the anime is simultaneously a little more interesting to talk about, while also being simpler for the sake of this video. In the 12th movie, Arceus and the Jewel of Life, it battles Giratina and Palkia at the same time, and it's not even at full strength while battling the two. It just straight up mops the floor with the both of them. These are both supremely powerful beings created by Arceus, and they get schooled like it's just another battle with youngster Joey. It's kind of ridiculous. I think it goes without saying, even from just a straightforward power level point of view, Arceus is insane. And it's not super crazy to say that it's the strongest Pokemon. However, with Gen 6 came Mega Evolutions, and things got weird as far as the totem pole of strong Pokemon goes. The noteworthy ones being Mega Mewtwo and Mega Rayquaza, as well as Primal Groudon and Kyogre. All of these Pokemon have a higher base stat total than Arceus by a pretty decent margin, being 770 or 780, all really terrifying to face in a battle. And what about Gen 8's Eternamax Eternatus with its 1125 base stat total? It's not something the player can use, but it's something that exists in the series. Gameplay-wise, it's objectively stronger than Arceus. But can these Pokemon beat Arceus in lore? This thing supposedly created the Pokemon universe, so it seems unlikely. But we need to factor in the possibility that maybe that ability to create and shape the world doesn't apply to its actual strength. Perhaps those abilities, that power, is more of a special utility rather than something to determine how strong it is in a fight against a powerful Pokemon. If Arceus is something that can be defeated in-game, then I think this possibility is at least something to consider. I do think the idea of these megaforms and such being stronger than Arceus in story to be pretty interesting, as something like Mewtwo is clearly a man-made Pokemon. If a man-made creation like a Pokeball can catch Arceus, then perhaps it's not too outrageous to think that a man-made Pokemon has the potential to be stronger than Arceus, at least from a battling point of view. Having talked a bit about these Pokemon with alternate forms, more clearly challenging the status quo of Arceus, you may have noticed that the only Pokemon with a higher stat total are all things like Mega or alternate forms. None of their base forms are stronger. Don't forget, that includes the likes of Zacian and Zamazenta. So without any of these, Arceus remains at the top in this regard, and it doesn't have or need an upgraded form of any kind. And if it did, well, that could end up being a serious problem. I would imagine they would only give Arceus an upgraded form for some sort of gimmick boss fight in the story like Eternatus. What would its stats even look like? Just 255 in literally everything? Regardless, the fact that Arceus has remained the Pokemon with the most base stat total when discounting things like Mega Evolutions may lead some to say that it should be considered the strongest Pokemon of all time, even disregarding the mythology surrounding the Pokemon itself. Now, of course, base stat totals don't mean everything. Naturally, you gotta worry about typings and available move pools on other Pokemon as well. That said, there's a good reason Arceus has constantly shown up in Ubers since its introduction to the series. Speaking of which, the idea of it being the most powerful Pokemon also permeated in the competitive scene. It was so strong that trying to figure out how to keep it around in the Uber tier was overly complicated. And it ended up getting banned anyway. Probably the most infamous way to use it is without any plates as a normal type, using Swords Dance and Extreme Speed. This alone was an absolute nightmare to face for so many players. Oftentimes, the best way to counter Arceus in Gen 4 was with another Arceus. You could see how players were annoyed enough by how it affected the meta, and how people were forced to put together their teams, especially when there were also other major meta-changing things that came with Gen 4, like the move Stealth Rock. The the Pokemon's mere presence loomed over the community. A lot of people just weren't sure what to make of something so powerful being put in the game. And with those plates, there were so many possible routes to go with. It was really cool and really awful at the same time. Even with Gen 6 and introducing alternate incredibly powerful forms for legendary Pokemon, Arceus could still counter them despite its inferior overall base stat total. Normal type and ground type Arceus in particular were major standouts, with the ground type meta being able to more easily take out some of these scarier Pokemon in the Uber tier, though many still preferred the extreme speed set without any plates. Though all of the plate typings have their strong uses in every generation. It's just insane how much Arceus can do. However, many players won't actually name Arceus as their favorite legendary to use in competitive. Many will instead name something like Kyogre as their most beloved, or their most hated, depending on the circumstances. Now, while Legends Arceus doesn't have any possible competitive play, it does add some interesting context to its power within the lore. It's implied that the Arceus we see is just a small part of its full being, that when you defeat it in-game, it's just giving a piece of itself to you. But the Pokemon you get is literally just the Arceus we know. This takes us back to the idea that it created the universe with 1,000 arms. It was a common theory that Arceus was just possibly one of those arms, and there are other parts of this Pokemon that exist throughout the entire universe. The release of Legends Arceus has added more fuel to that idea, and it does really bring back a much-needed sense of mystery to the creature. The game also makes it feel like many parts of the Sinnoh myths have truth to them after all, even if some aspects perhaps can't be taken entirely literally. They're not really trying to make you doubt that Arceus is in some way the creator of the Pokemon universe as we know it. If the Arceus we see is just one of those 1,000 arms, then when discussing it as the strongest Pokemon within the story, do we factor in the idea that there are 999 more of these running around in the cosmos, some way or another? I mean, at that point, there's zero argument about it being the most powerful, right? I suppose one could argue that the other parts of it aren't actually Pokemon or something. But even so, the scale of this thing feels genuinely endless. This also could explain how Arceus can be defeated as well, since it would just be a small part of the true being. Though there is fan speculation about how those other arms may be the unknown, but I'm not sure if that's the case. Maybe the unknown represent another small part of Arceus or something, or they simply have a connection. But I think it's intended to be something that we don't know about yet. It's possible we'll never know anything regarding the topic. After all, what's a good mystery if they give a direct answer for everything? Regardless, there's a lot to consider when it comes to the lore of Arceus and how powerful it is due to a lot of these factors. And then there's just the outright weird things it can do, such as being directly responsible for the existence of the creation trio itself, and therefore being responsible for the existence of time and space as we know it. Meaning that Arceus was able to function and exist before those two concepts were even around, which is appropriately difficult to even grasp. It also sends the player character back in time in Legends Arceus, and can move through time itself. So I think this is a potential example of something that it can't do in gameplay that could probably help it in a fight. If it's somehow losing in a fight to, say, Rayquaza, could Arceus, pull a Samurai Jack and just decide to send Rayquaza to a totally different time period or world instantly if it really wanted to? This also raises questions about how omnipotent Arceus truly is as well, possibly existing in many places and times all at once. Actually, its ability in Pokemon Conquest is literally called omnipotent, so maybe that answers our own question right there. All of this, and I haven't mentioned the new plate in Legends Arceus, the Legend Plate. This will change Arceus' type when using Judgment automatically, and be the most effective type against whatever Pokemon it's used against. So if you're facing Garchomp, you're getting Ice type for 4 times effectiveness by default. I'm not sure if I can think of something that immediately felt this crazy at first sight. I didn't mention it while talking about competitive because Legends Arceus doesn't have competitive due to the lack of being able to battle other players. It also may not actually end up existing outside of this game either. But if it does, well, I have no idea how they're going to handle that. I have to imagine that the community will end up banning it. So we have an omnipotent, time-traveling, space-controlling Pokemon that apparently created the Pokemon universe, with the highest base stats of any non-alternate form in the franchise. So who can possibly dethrone its status as the most powerful Pokemon in the franchise? Some fans will say that the Mega forms of Pokemon like Mewtwo and Rayquaza are still stronger despite that, probably due to their higher base stats. And I can totally see them holding their own or even defeating Arceus under certain circumstances. But there's so many questions with this subject due to what we just talked about. What does beating Arceus in a Pokemon fight really mean if that's only just a piece of the true being? What if the Pokemon we know really is just one arm, so to speak? Does that mean that they really won? Can they still really be considered stronger? Perhaps if you only want the conversation to be completely devoid of those factors, then sure. It's maybe not totally crazy to say that, but at that point, you might as well just be talking about it from a gameplay standpoint. You just can't ignore the ridiculous things that we know for a fact Arceus can do. He banished another incredibly powerful Pokemon like Giratina to another dimension, travels across time, sends other people through time, whether they want to or not, and can transform objects with little effort, like the player character's smartphone at the start of Legends Arceus. It's a creature that seemingly can do almost anything it wants, whenever it wants. So is Arceus truly the strongest Pokemon? I would say yes, almost certainly so. While there are many arguments to be made for other Pokemon from a gameplay and competitive standpoint, from the point of lore, there's almost no way it isn't the strongest. The feats and powers of Arceus are undeniable and are incredibly difficult to contend with. But what do you think? There will always be speculation and theories surrounding Arceus. So, do you think that there's something that prevents it from being worthy of holding the title of strongest? Or do you agree for different reasons? Let me know in the comments below. Welcome back to the outro, folks, your favorite part of the video. Thank you for enjoying another Mystic Umbreon video. We made it through the end of the 8th generation, and now we begin the long trek into late 2022 where Pokemon Scarlet and Violet await us. It's a whole new world we'll live in, but we still gotta catch them all. However, there's still a ton of videos to do and experiences to have until then. If you're interested in more Mystic content, check out my TikTok and the Mystic Umbreon Shorts YouTube channel. If we get the 10K followers on TikTok, I'll be doing a viewer's choice video. If you like Genshin Impact, check out my Genshin channel Teibachinary. So if you all enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. See you next time.